This is a Suunto Race S, Suunto's latest watch that isn't just a little bit smaller, but more importantly, a heck of a lot better. Through a combination of hardware changes, algorithm updates, and new software features, it's unquestionably one of the most incredibly priced endurance sports watches out there today. I've been putting it through its paces from swim to bike to run, seeing how well it handles across all those different sports, plus as well just simply day-to-day usage as a smartwatch. In this review, I'm going to dive into what's new, whether or not it works as described, how it differs from its older and bigger sibling, the Suunto Race, as well as talk about things like accuracy and just a general walkthrough of the watch as well. With that, let's just simply get right into it. The very first thing to know, and probably the most important thing to know, is that this thing is priced at $349 US or 349 euros. And this isn't some plastic watch. This thing has a stainless steel case on the outside, and that's $100 cheaper than the stainless steel edition of the Suunto Race that was $449. Suunto is unquestionably coming for blood with this pricing. Not so much like Garmin's blood or Apple's blood, but really Polar and Coros's blood. I mean, this watch clearly undercuts both of those companies' pricing strategies and pretty much just like throws it through the paper shredder. But back on the watch itself from a hardware standpoint, the case size is described as a 45mm case compared to the 49mm of the larger Suunto Race. It's got a 1.32-inch AMOLED display compared to the 1.43-inch AMOLED display of the Suunto Race. Of course, it weighs less, 60 grams for the Suunto Race S versus 83 grams for the stainless steel edition of the Suunto Race. It still has an AMOLED display like before, but because the resolution of the displays are identical, 466 pixels across on both of these, that means that you basically have more pixels per inch on the smaller unit. Now, from a glass standpoint, the Suunto Race S has a Gorilla Glass display as opposed to the sapphire crystal glass display of the Suunto Race. Personally, I haven't really found that to be much of an issue on all the watches I've tested over the last 15 years, but of course to each their own. Next on the hardware front is a new optical heart rate sensor. If you flip it over here, you'll see this new optical heart rate sensor. You'll see both them blinking. Note you have basically double the LED. So you have these 4 little sets right there versus 2 right there. These 2 dots are the charging connectors, the charging pads there. And of course, if you've watched any review of the original Suunto Race right here, you knew one truism. The optical heart rate sensor sucked very, very badly. This solves that. Not to ruin part of my accuracy section here, but this is damn good. This is really, really good. Not like Apple and Garmin really good, but just squeaking in below it. And I think they're gonna get there. So kudos on that, and more on that later on what parts worked really well and what parts needed a bit of love. Speaking of things that need love, by the way, is this video, the like button down the bottom there, or the subscribe button? Both of those do legitimately help out this video and the channel, and I certainly appreciate it. Next, a quickie on the hardware side. They've increased the base storage from 16 gigs to 32 gigs. That's almost entirely used for mapping. There's no music storage on this. And so the 32 gigs is nice. The existing Suunto Race, the base edition had 16 gigs versus that titanium edition had 32 gigs versus the base edition of the Suunto Race S has 32 gigs. And there's only, at the moment anyways, one edition of the Suunto Race S, which is the base edition for $349. That's stainless steel. Now, what's notable about this is that Suunto does not yet have things like street names or points of interest in their map data set. Still, I wouldn't fret about it if you've got a 16 gig Suunto Race, the bigger one. It's still going to be plenty to have an entire continent's worth of maps on there, let alone 2 continents worth of maps. Speaking of continents, by the way, notably the Suunto Race S, if you look on the back, is made in Finland, manufactured in Finland. The Suunto Race was manufactured in China versus the Race S is going to be actually split across 2 different manufacturing facilities. For most watches going to North America and Europe, they'll be coming out of Finland, and for watches going to Asia, they'll be coming out of China. Suunto notes that's not an absolute guarantee. There may be edge cases at crazy high demands where one comes from the other or stuff like that, but generally speaking, you should be getting a Finland-produced watch in Europe and North America. So let's get into the software features. And the first big software feature is the addition of Suunto's Climb Guidance. This is essentially like Garmin's ClimbPro, but it's Suunto's version of it, which automatically categorizes and displays your climbs as you're hiking or running up a big mountain or hill. So let's take a look at this run I did last week. I created this route on Strava, and then from there it automatically synced to the Suunto app. In that, you can actually see the Climb Pro showing right here or here, or wherever it is on the screen there, at the bottom. You'll see the number of climbs there, but to see the enumeration of the climbs more easily, let me throw another screenshot on the screen here, showing you a route that I often do in the Chamonix Mont Blanc area that basically has more climbs to it. You can see the number of climbs listed there in red. That's the steeper climbs, and they have kind of the shallower climbs and the shallower descents, and then the steeper descents. And those all show up in the app. But the app, of course, isn't what we all care about. What we care about shows up on the watch. And the way that works now is that when you have a route loaded, you'll see those same climbs displayed on the watch. So once I got out running, as I approached the climb, I got a notification that my first climb is upcoming. It'll show you like 1 of 4 or however many climbs are on that particular route. You need to tap the upper right hand plus and minus button, and that'll get you to the new climb guidance screen that shows that particular climb until the top. Now, as you can see, it's one continuous color and essentially shows you how much elevation to the top as well as the distance to the top. And then as you go along, it'll color in the section of the climb that you've already completed. So I was pretty happy about that. And then the actual elevation profile was correct and all that stuff was good. Now there's 2 things I'd like to see tweaked here. The first one is that when you load up the route at the beginning of the day, I like to be able to see all the climbs listed there. You can see that on a Garmin watch in Climb Pro, and it's kind of handy. And the second example is side by side on the climb itself versus Garmin Climb Pro. You see there's a coloration of the climbs based on the gradient. In Suunto's case, it's basically just one color the entire time. I like to see a little more color there because that makes it easy at a glance to see what suck is upcoming, if that makes sense. Still, great job for first go with this from Suunto. Next on the newness is new watch faces. This is pretty straightforward. You got 3 new watch faces to choose from. There are the 3 new watch faces, but more interesting than that is the fact that you can now customize those watch faces directly from the watch itself. So if I have the watch right here, I simply tap twice. There we go, and now we can change any of these things right there from it. I can say, you know what, instead of having the sunset time right there, I can go ahead and just scroll through the different complications, and I can change that there. I can also go in and change the coloring of this. I can change which watch face it is. I can do all that directly from the unit itself. My only minor nitpick with this is that it wants to do this every single time I take a shower. Whatever happens with the shower water hitting this thing, it's constantly trying to rearrange my watch face, and I get a new, basically customized complication watch face every single time I get out of the shower. But that's something that I think they can sort out over time and hasn't really been a big deal to me. Instead though, the next new feature is a faster UI, or basically user interface of the watch itself. Here, just kind of swiping through stuff, it's fast now. Like, it moves quick. There's virtually no lag at all going through stuff. And I know some will say, well, who goes through that like that? Anytime you use the watch during the day, you're gonna swipe through quickly to find something, right? And now I can swipe through. I can go down, where's my sleep? There we go, from last night. A little bit of lag right there on enumerating that, but otherwise, like, I can move through this pretty quickly and all is good. If I look at the Suunto Race over here, the same thing. You can see there's a bit more lag on that. When I swipe down, it kind of goes chung each time, but it gets there eventually. Next, we got a bunch of little things. I'm just gonna simply quickly go through it because they're little things. First up, they increased the number of emoji in the watch from roughly 300 to roughly 1,000, which is a pretty good deal. But more importantly, they made them colorful. Up until now, the emoji has been black and white on the Suunto watches, and now they are colorful. They're yellow, like emoji should be. Next, they've gone ahead and increased the zoom level on the map mode from 2 kilometers to 20 kilometers. So if you're in map mode, you can zoom out to 20 kilometers. In the past, it was 2. And Suunto says they're working on expanding that beyond just the 20 kilometers to as big as they can make it. Of course, it's a balance between basically loading map tiles and stuff like that and performance, and that's why it's at the limit that it is right now. Next, they've added sport-specific display settings, so you basically can have display settings for things like brightness and stuff like that on a per sport basis, as opposed to having it for the entire watch all the time. They've also changed the turn-by-turn notification to be much smaller, just the very bottom of the screen, as opposed to blanketing your entire watch when you had a turn coming up. And likewise, when you pause a sport activity, you can now go through all your data pages and data fields just like normal. It's just simply paused. So I know these sound like little things, but if you've used Suunto watches before, or if you used any other sport watches, you know some of these little things are what kind of makes or break it in the grand scheme of things. Another quickie, they added Vietnamese language support. And then finally, on the Suunto app side of things, they've added women's health tracking, or in particular menstrual cycles tracking, to the app itself. Keep in mind though, it's not doing any automatic detection from the watch, it is merely manual logging, but again, Suunto says this is sort of like the first step towards things. And then rounding out the spec stuff, just a couple confirmations, continues to have multi-band or dual frequency GPS, continues to have 50-meter water resistance level, and it continues to have the same exact 22mm bands that you can swap out right there, just simply pop them out, industry standard stuff, so you can choose whatever bands you want. Okay, so with that, let me just do a quick tour through the watch, then we'll talk about accuracy, and then we'll wrap things up. This is the watch itself. There is both an always-on display mode and a gesture-based mode. Always-on display means that when it's on your wrist, the display is always on, except it goes down to a state like this where you can see the watch hands right there after a few seconds of no movement, versus the gesture-based means that this would actually just be entirely black. So it turns off the display. You can see the battery life chart on the screen right now. I would say that battery life chart is a little bit optimistic when it comes to the smartwatch battery life. I was getting like more 3-ish, maybe 4 at best days on the always on display. And then the gesture-based mode, it was like 4.5 to 5 days display there. However, for the GPS numbers they show there, it was pretty much spot on. In a non-navigation scenario, I was at like roughly 29 hours of estimated battery life. And then in a navigation-enabled scenario, I was like 19-ish or so. So obviously you consume more battery life when you've got maps and navigation, all that kind of stuff. But good to see that they basically nailed those numbers there from the GPS perspective. Now, this is the watch face that I mentioned earlier on. I'm not going to beat that dead horse again. We'll go on down from there. And you can see these are my different widgets. So I got my logbook, timer, etc. I don't know why I thought it'd be a good idea to shoot this on the Monday, because all my stats reset for the week. So the logbook resets and my training load resets and all the things reset. A couple things are still there, but for example, you see right there, training record activities. This is one nitpick I've had with some watches. Coros does the same thing. Suunto does at least properly show my historical training load right there, my CTL and TSB, but it's not showing my current training load. Normally the screen would show my TSS over the last 7 days. You can see a video I took last night showing that TSS over the last 7 days. I don't understand why they reset it on Monday morning. My training load didn't reset. Just continue a 7-day rolling average. It's just so much easier and makes way more sense. Anyways, going back from there, you can tap these open though to look at them. So you can see right there, I can tap that open. I can see my performance stats, my running estimates, etc. These are all different stats that Suunto's had on their watches for a while, but they're just simply accessible here. It records your HRV status as well. The HRV status is gathered at night while you sleep, and then over time, it'll trend that. Going back up here, media controls, this is for controlling music on your phone. There is, again, no music playback from this device, and I wouldn't expect Suunto to add that either. While adding MP3 playback from this to audio devices, Suunto has said is technically possible. The reality is in 2024, people want things like Spotify and YouTube Music and other platforms that Suunto is simply not going to unlock given their smaller user base size. It's something that even the big companies have problems unlocking, and so I wouldn't expect that to change anytime soon. In any case, you're going to see all of your regular stats there, like steps and so on displayed. You can see last day's steps, average calories, etc. All the stuff you come to expect from an activity tracker today. If I look at my sleep stats, for example, these are all pretty much been spot on in terms of the time I went to sleep or woke up. They were all good there. One of the things I don't tend to do though is to kind of judge the sleep stages or phases. The reality is that even the comparative technology to do that isn't all that accurate, and frankly, most of the companies get it wrong anyways, and so I don't really worry too much about that. Instead, I worry about, are these times correct? The time that I fell asleep and woke up, and they are indeed correct, and they have been for all the nights I've slept on it so far. Speaking of nights, at nighttime, there is a flashlight here. You can just go ahead and hold this down for a second, turns on the flashlight, and there you go. Doesn't look super bright in a well-lit studio like this, but I found it more than enough to get around the hotels I've been in the last week and to get around in the middle of the night, which is what you want to do. So sliding into the sports side of things here, you'll tap the upper right-hand button once to open up the sport menu. It's one of the only places you do see a tiny bit of lag right there. And you can do things like pairing of sensors for Bluetooth sensors. I would say that the whole sensor pairing thing on Suunto watches still continues to be not awesome at all. You can only pair, for example, one power meter at a time. So if you have a bike and a trainer, it doesn't work. If you have multiple bikes, it doesn't work. You have to de-pair and repair, and you can't see what the names of the sensors are. Like, all that is probably the biggest single takeaway that Suunto needs to come out of this for things to fix to be more competitive with really any other watch out there in the sports sensor realm. Now, these are your sport modes right here. You can go down like this, and I can tap into this, and I can go through all the different sport profiles. There is plenty here. You can add and remove sport profiles from the mobile app onto this, and you can customize those profiles as well. Here's a couple screenshots of some of that customization right there. Sliding back here, I can change the battery performance mode. I can load up a route. So if I choose a route right there, I'm just pull the one of the routes open up. We're gonna grab this Mont Blanc chunk right there, and you'll see I can choose to navigate it. If I go down, I can look at the distance, the ascent, the descent, highest points, etc. You won't see though any of the climbs listed. Remember I mentioned earlier on, there's no like showing those climbs ahead of time, but you can at least go ahead and put that into the navigation list there. You can change your map style if you want from light or dark. and you can add these Suunto Plus apps. Suunto has tons and tons and tons of different apps, and they're adding more apps every quarter, including today as well, covering a wide variety of things. And some of these are apps for sensor connectivity to things like Moxie sensors and others. Some of them are just various apps that kind of give you more training stats. I have argued for a long time that Suunto does a great job of developing all these apps, but they should just be part of the native watch base unit itself. Especially for the ones that have been around for a while, that have proven they've got value, they shouldn't just be like kind of all these apps floating all over the place, because you're limited in the number of apps you can load at a single point in time, which is kind of a bummer. This is also, by the way, if you go down where you can add in structured workouts. So I did a structured interval workout the other day. I just added it from the guides right down here. So back up the top, I'm gonna change this to running. And then from there, I would simply tap start. Obviously, you want to wait for your heart rate and GPS lock at the top, and it's showing you how many hours of battery life I have remaining in this particular battery mode. If I were to change that battery mode to something else, for example, endurance, ultra, tour, you can see what it does. And if I tap into this, it'll tell you what it's going to do, what it's going to change. For example, it's going to reduce the GPS accuracy there. Still has 1 second logging, always on display enabled, still has heart rate, the map's disabled, and so on. Once you're ready to go though, you just simply tap up here to start, and then off you go. I'm gonna simply dismiss the GPS warning. I'm inside, obviously, and underneath the giant concrete structure, so it's not gonna find GPS here. I can tap this button to go and iterate through the different data pages there. This is showing my map data page if I was outside. Instead, here is a picture of the map while I'm outside. It's very, very easy. I can zoom in and out using the digital crown on the side there. I can also go ahead and move around the screen with my finger if I want to. And of course, you're gonna see all the different stats in your data pages as you've configured them. At the end of your workout, you'll see your summary stats for that particular workout. It'll show you time and zone, your training load and recovery time, and all that stuff is there just as it was in the past. And all that stuff will also sync over to the Suunto app, where you can see even more stats there. And then of course from there, it'll sync off to apps like Strava and Training Peaks and all the different, I think 190 different partners they have right now that you can connect to the platform. Oh, and then lastly, before we talk accuracy, for downloading maps, you can need to be in range of Wi-Fi. You use your phone to choose which map region you want. By default, it'll show you the map region nearest to you, and you can just choose to download it from Wi-Fi onto your watch. All the maps are free all around the world. They're all pretty small size, which is nice. Suunto's done a good job of breaking up those maps into really small chunks, so you can get the region you want without having to download literally the entire content. It makes it pretty handy. Now, with that said, let's look at accuracy. First up, we've got heart rate accuracy. You remember the Suunto Race it was not hot for heart rate accuracy. So let's start with the running side of things, and I'm just gonna give it to you straight. It's really good here. First up, I got a relatively steady state run, as you can see, and outside of the first 60 seconds or so, it's basically like perfect across the board. A tiny blip towards the end there, but this run included uphill and downhill running, kind of fast running, casual running, all the things. No problems at all. Next up, we got another run. This is a steeper run with some uphills and downhills. That's notable because downhills often trigger cadence lock, which is basically when the heart rate optical sensor locks on to the loudest thumping thing, which is your legs going down the hill, and then gives you inaccurate heart rate. Here, no problems at all. Spot on, well done. After that, I've got an interval run. These are 800-meter hard intervals, pretty hard in fact, and it nailed it, like very, very strong. Again, that little blip in the first 90 seconds or so, but after that, it was very, very solid. And a little bit of wiggles on one of the last intervals there, but that's likely actually from me holding up a camera in that interval to take this video you see right here. So I wouldn't like hold it against them because that could introduce some artifacts there. Next up, we got another kind of unexpected interval run. I didn't intend this to be an interval run, but just sort of ended up that way. I went up a mountain and down a mountain, and again, it was spot on across the board. That said, while running and kind of pedestrian stuff was great, the cycling outdoors was not so hot. It wasn't good at all. It was actually pretty darn bad, in fact. You can see one 3-hour ride in here, and another like hour and a half or so ride, and the line that doesn't match the other ones, that's the Suunto Race S. And now keep in mind that a lot of watches do struggle with cycling outdoors, and this is just one of those watches. Now, next up on GPS, it's spot on. Look, I could like show you a million screenshots, and I will right now in just a second here. But just like the Suunto Race, it's very, very good. For all the land-based stuff, it nailed it. Like whether it's mountains or not mountains or cities or you name it, running or cycling, it is perfect. You can see this entire sequence of perfect looking screenshots because that's all I have. It's perfect. So I'm not going to belabor it anymore. Instead, let's talk about swimming. Like with the optical heart rate sensor on the Suunto Race continues to be troubling for me for swimming, open water swimming in particular, I'm talking about here, for GPS accuracy. The good news is, they seem to have fixed it in the Suunto Race S. In my open water swim, it was perfectly fine. It was not like, perfection greatness, but it was very, very close to the reference track, close enough that I'm like, yep, that'll do, donkey, that'll do. And that also included passing the test where I basically tread water for 15 to 30 seconds, something super common for swimmers to do, whether they are waiting for a boat to pass or waiting for someone to catch up to them or whatever the case may be. It had no problems with that, unlike its bigger sibling, which has seemed to struggle a little bit there and still does as well. Okay, so with all that said, where does Suunto stand? Well, ultimately, Suunto nailed it with the Race S. It's as simple as that. They took a $449 watch, they increased accuracy, increased features, increased basically everything except the size, and made it a $349 watch. Thus, over the last 14 months, Suunto has done something relatively impressive. They've gone from a company that was teetering on the edge of something, to releasing the Suunto Vertical, which gave me hope, to getting to the Suunto Race, which was like, holy crap, that's super impressive for the price, to dropping the price yet again, packing in more features, increasing accuracy, doing literally everything people asked of them, and doing it at a price that is cheaper than everyone else out there. For that, they deserve, hopefully, your wallets, and they deserve, at least if nothing else, a kudos, because good job there. With that, thanks for watching. There is plenty more to come this week, including stuff in less than 3 hours from now. So don't forget to whack that subscribe button there for plenty more sports technology goodness, or if you just found this interesting at all. With that, have a good one.